Hello, everyone. Welcome to Progressive HR Live. I'm your host, Corrine Woodham-Hollebeck, founder of Progressive HR, and I'm with my guest today, Tim Whitley, who is the HRS Director with Oklahoma State University, as well as the HR Tech Wizard. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Corrine. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, how's the weather like in the OK State?
It is cold right now, not as cold as it has been. We had school canceled yesterday because we had a sheet of ice over everything, but it's warmed up a little bit. But we're doing good now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, here in Wisconsin, like I mentioned, we've got still about 2 feet of snow on the ground, and it's snowing again. So super, super crazy. We didn't think we were going to get this much snow this winter.
It's always a surprise.
That is for definite. So, hello, Progressive HR audience. Welcome back. This is our first episode of our season 4 on January. And if you are just joining the live now, go ahead and introduce yourself in the comments. Let us know who you are, where you're streaming from, what's the weather like in your neck of the woods or neck of the city. Is it what you expected? Is this winter what you expected? We're going to go ahead and jump into the questions for Tim Whitley, our guest today, the HRIS Director with Oklahoma State University and the HR Tech Wizard. So, Tim, my first question, what are the 5 to 7 most important action items HR can take in the decision to implement new technology, Gen AI or other words?
Yeah, I think the big thing I always try to do whenever we're looking at implementing new technology is looking at the process underlying it. So whether it's a recruiting system or learning system or performance management, so mapping out what do we do now, where are our pain points? Do we understand everything? So I really, anytime I've been part of a system implementation, the first thing we do is literally go on a whiteboard or get out butcher paper and map out the process step by step. It's always very illuminating because people discover things that they didn't know other people were doing, other groups were doing. But this also helps if you decide to look for a system that what are the things that we need it to do, what are our current problems that we needed to fix. I think the other thing I would say is your support capabilities. So one of the things that vendors will tell you is, their product is plug and play. Yeah, like just turn it on, a couple of days, you'll be ready to go. And rarely is that the case, not only for the implementation, but then the ongoing setup. What I've seen in a lot of HR departments is kind of maintenance of that system falls on functional areas. So that maybe the recruiting team is in charge of the recruiting system, the training team is in charge of the training system. And what happens is, they are having spent so much time doing their normal, training, recruiting, whatever. They don't have time to keep up with updates, to fix issues. And so that kind of stuff just falls by the wayside. So think about, once you get the system in place, who's going to support it? Do you have somebody that's dedicated to it? Because it's always going to be a lot more work than you imagine. I think getting insight from everybody involved in the process. Again, a lot of times there's groups that are involved in a process that we don't know about. We don't get their insight on, hey, we need this system to be able to do this process or generate this form or take this input. And then when you're shopping for systems, you may miss that. I think having a good relationship with IT, there's rarely a technology project anymore that's not going to involve IT support, whether that's single sign-on or data integrations or things like that. Get those people involved in your project, have discussions. I've tried, when I do system implementations, I try to have IT people in the demo so that they can ask those technical questions that we may not think about. And just a lot of different pieces that you may need IT support. I think probably the last thing, that's probably the biggest thing I would say is having a communication plan. I've seen often that communication kind of happens after the fact, like, oh, we've got this system coming, we need to think about how we're going to communicate it. But the communication and falls under the bigger umbrella of change management is such a vital piece. There's great systems that will fail because the team implementing it hasn't done a good job of communicating what's happening, the changes, what's going to be required. I'd say, go all in on your communication and over communicate and make sure you have a plan for how you're going to do that throughout the implementation process. So I think that's 5 things.
That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack. So, you just mentioned change management. We hear a lot about change management, and I know that you have your PMP. And your project management degree license certification.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about project management versus digital transformation and digital transformation versus change management. And you said, I believe, going back to some of your newsletters, which the newsletters are called HR Tech Wizardry, correct?
Yeah. And I'll give you the link, but you can send out. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's on Substack, everybody. You mentioned that change management, you have to identify the detractors and support and leverage their influence. So could you talk a little bit, you just talked a little bit about the 5 most important aspects when you want to implement an HRIS. But can you talk a little bit about like that whole conglomerate of change management, digital transformation, and project management? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, I think it's kind of different aspects of the same thing. So what I would say is digital transformation it's kind of like a strategy or a mindset, or it's like a culture, it's like something that the company organization is trying to do, and so there's going to be different pieces of that. I think digital is more than just technology. It's kind of that efficient processes. It's how we do things. It's thinking about the end user experience. So I think maybe that digital transformation is kind of an overall umbrella, and then change management, I would say is kind of a mindset that you build into your projects or into your implementations. Again, it's really a cultural thing. Like there's actual methodologies around change management. That you can get a certification as change management, but really it's kind of that understanding of how people change and how they accept change. And you brought up when I talked about detractors, but like one of the best things that I've done in any project is having a pilot group, because those people, not only do they feel honored that you've asked them to test out this system, but then when you roll out the system, they're the ones that are telling their friends, telling their coworkers, hey, we've already tried this, we've been using it, it's awesome. They listened to us, they made changes. So I think that kind of falls into change management strategies, but also kind of that mindset of knowing that people are resistant to change, and you have to do some work on the front end to make that happen. I think project management, I think there's some, you could say that that's a mindset, but a lot of it's just skills and techniques. It's about, making a project organized, structured. I think for me, like going through project management training and certification, the thing that has stuck with me that I've tried to bring into all the projects I've been a part of is that stakeholder management, like knowing who all the people are that are involved in this process or this project, getting their input, getting them involved early and often, or I talked about earlier about identifying all the stakeholders. Like I think that's a huge part of project management, and where a lot of projects go astray because they don't have the right people in the conversation, and then something gets missed. Like for instance, I was part of a project where a company was putting in a new applicant tracking system, and they didn't consult with the people who were doing a lot of the onboarding, and the system didn't have an I-9 functionality. So they got kind of like halfway through this implementation and realized that they didn't have like a piece where people could do their I-9, which is a huge part of what they were doing already. So they ended up having to take that out of the system, and people were going back to doing that on paper, which kind of defeated the whole purpose. So I think there's things like that where, project management gets you in that mindset and makes you go through exercises to like, who are all these people in this process, and how do we get them involved and get their input? So hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, thanks. I wanted you to answer that question a little bit, kind of like as a background for the audience, because we're always we hear so many times project management, change management, digital transformation. They kind of get pushed all together, but I wanted to get your opinion on separating them and what they were for the audience.
Yeah.
So audience, if you're just joining us now, this is Progressive HR Live. We're here with our guest, Tim Whitley, who is the HRS director with Oklahoma State University and also the HR Tech Wizard. If you are just joining us, go ahead now and add your name to the comments. Let us know where you're joining from. We like to keep this conversation going. If you have any questions for Tim about HRIS implementations or HR tech in general, he is the wizard. So you can go ahead and ask those and we'll answer those live. So you might have explained a little bit about that in the first question, which was the 5 to 7 action items. But I wanted to ask you, what are the foundations that need to be in place when implementing new technologies in any organization? If you could answer that just really quickly.
Yeah, I think for me, it really comes down to culture. And we don't often, and this was something that took me a long time to learn working in HRIS. I always thought it was about the technology, like whatever the system was, but really, there's kind of an underlying structure of culture that makes a technology work. And that's things, again, going back to change management. How well do people respond to change? How well are people used to dealing with technology and adapting to new systems? How well does your organization communicate? Kind of like the hierarchy of the organization. Do people, if you push down an initiative, do people accept that, or is there a lot of resistance? So I think that's huge. And if your organization doesn't have a culture of technology, doesn't mean that you can't implement it, but I think you have to be aware that you may have to do some extra work on the front end, or you may have to bring in consultants or somebody like that to help with that change management piece. But again, it's never just the technology. There's always these systemic issues that go along with it that's going to make it work or not. And I think the other thing is kind of along with communication is having an ownership plan. Again, we get really focused on that implementation piece, but we don't think about, okay, so going forward, who's going to support this? Who's going to be in charge if something breaks? Who's going to reach out to the vendor? Who's going to be a lot of these cloud-based systems now, they put out regular updates like quarterly or even monthly. So who's going to be monitoring those? And a lot of times what happens is nobody is, and the system stops working and nobody really knows why. It's because nobody's been keeping up with it. So I think things like that, I think especially if it's a complicated system. So like, if you're doing like an ERP that's going to span like finance and HR and supply chain or something, there's never like a clear-cut boundary between all of those different modules. So understanding who's going to support each piece of it will help you once you're live with that system.
Yeah, it's talking about ERPs. Two of the organizations that I work with, one of the organizations where I was corporate HR, and then the other organization where I was consulting, or actually fractional CHRO. Both organizations were in the midst of, when I came in, implementing an ERP system, and it was over a year-long process, and they did whatever they could. They had 2 people in the company supporting the ERP. And at the end, after this year-long process of all the departments, sending in their process maps and their like top 10 process for the ERP system, they decided not to implement it because they couldn't, because there was no glue in certain functional areas that stuck to things together. And it just seemed like a complete, oh gosh, waste, complete waste. And we were so close. So, I really like when I love your content on LinkedIn. I think one of my most favorite posts is your pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of HR tech needs. And I think that we need to post a link to that in the comments here. But you say it's a foundational layer is mindset. For our audience, what are the other layers of Maslow's? Or I wouldn't say it's Maslow's hierarchy of HR tech needs. I'd say it's Whitley's hierarchy of tech needs. Don't give the credit to Maslow. He doesn't deserve it. You deserve it.
That's scary.
What are the other layers?
Yeah. So are you asking me?
Yeah. I'm asking you what. So we have the foundational layer is mindset, and the other two layers. Yes.
Yeah, I think. So actually. The next layer is skills, and I think that's where so we talk about mindsets, and those are things like kind of digital transformation, culture, change management. I think the next level is skills. It's like how do you actually do those? That's where we talk about like project management. So there's kind of a project management mindset, like understanding what goes into a project, stakeholders, but then there's actually like, how do you do that? How do you build a schedule? How do you create a Gantt chart? How do you allocate resources, things like that? And then like with change management, there's all these different methodologies like ACTAR and different things like that. But how do you actually put those into practice? And then at the top level is just the execution, like actually doing it, like taking, you've got you've got your culture minds foundation, you've got your skills, and then taking that and doing it is different. And I think again, like you can implement technology without those things in place, but you just have to be aware that if something's missing down here, you're going to have to do more work up here to get that, on the execution. If you don't have a culture of change, you're going to have to do more work on the execution to get people ready and willing to make the change. So I hope that makes sense. I think there's a lot of different metaphors you could use for that, but I think that's I feel like for me, like that's kind of my central tenet when I talk to people about technologies. It's so much more than just the system. You've got to have all these other pieces in place, so you got to be thinking about them. And it's hard, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. It's easy to just say, oh, we're going to put in a new ATS. It's hard to say, how are we going to get our people excited and willing to use this and make it work for our organization? So I think that's why it doesn't happen a lot. But you're spending, I mean, some of these systems, like those ERP systems, I mean, those are millions of dollars. Like even a cloud-based system, I mean, you're talking 6 figures a year that mid-sized companies are spending for these. Like, you want to make them work, and the money that you're going to spend on time and resources to make it work will pay dividends if people are using it and it's actually making your processes work better.
Yeah, but as your point, you do have to start and really look at, is it the right time for this? Or what else? What other work do we have to do to make it the right time?
Yeah.
So one of the comments that came in as we were talking is from Ryan. He says, "Good point, Tim. Good to have a solid understanding of which employees will support with the administration of any system." So, and then also Marnie said, "Yes, I haven't seen that post, but please do share." So there is a request for you to share the link to that post, but also possibly do another post and change out Maslow's with Whitley. So that's what my call to action to you.
Okay. I think I called it the pyramid of power, but I could call it the
pyramid of power. Yeah.
I
Oh, wait,
always
wait,
love
wait.
alliteration.
I have it in my notes here. I want to make sure that, oh no, I don't have it. Yeah. Pyramid, something and pairs. Oh, I gotta have it here. It was in your newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful pyramids and perfect pairs.
Okay,
Pairs with an I.
I'll find that link. Yeah.
Oh, too funny. So we got some great comments coming in. I got to look up and make sure that this, because it just says LinkedIn user. So I want to make sure that, this is from Alex Kuchev. And he says, well said, tracking adoption is key to guaranteeing the ROI. Always keep in mind the end users of the systems and explain back what is in it for them. Exactly. And then one from Yvonne. Yes, execution needs to be inserted into the organizational culture change. Absolutely, absolutely. So not only do you have digital transformation, you have change management and culture change, and then also the project management. So many different things you need to think about. It's not just simple.
Right.
So quickly, kind of like pivoting, talking about HR tech being simple. We have vendors out there to help us a lot of the times with administration and with the implementation. So, and this is a question that has been going on in my mind for a long time now. Are there truly going to be a best HR tech for your company? Aren't all the vendors pretty much the same, or is it just about finding the best partner?
Yeah, I think that's a hard question. Especially, I've worked with a lot of systems, but I definitely haven't worked with all of them. And I definitely haven't worked in like every industry. I do know that, there's a lot of very industry specific focused organizations. Like we use a system called Banner, which they are focused on higher ed. And there's a lot of kind of weird administrative issues in higher ed that they address in their HRIS. There's companies like Rippling that they really are focused on like small, like startups or smaller companies that, Bamboo HR would be another one. But I do think within that, there are vendors that are better than others. And I can't, I'm not going to give you my list of my favorite vendors.
Why not? Why not?
But I do, and I try not to be too negative about vendors, because I know that they're trying to, do what's best for their customers and they're trying to make money. But I do get frustrated because I think really the vendor is in a position of power when they're selling, when they're, really when you get into the implementation or selling phase, because you as a user, especially if you don't have an HR tech background, you don't know what you don't know. So you don't, especially if you don't have an existing system that does that. Like if you're, like we were putting in an onboarding system from paper, like you don't know everything that an onboarding system should do. But the vendor, they know what their system can do, and they're going to show you the things that they like that their system does, and they're going to gloss over the things that maybe it doesn't do too well. And so I think really the best advice I can give to people is you just got to do your due diligence. And that's where it comes in, doing that process mapping. Like you need to have a very clear list of requirements. Like we have to have, like our system has to be able to do these things. It has to be able to do I-9s. It has to be able to do electronic signatures. Every project I've been on, we break it up into, these are our must-haves, these are our nice-to-haves, and these are kind of our wish list or utopia type items. Like if it does it, it's great, but it's not going to break the bank. And there's all kinds of matrices out there that you can find where you can then take those, and as you're talking to vendors, you can rank them based on how well they do in these different areas. But
do you have a template for that?
I have one I've used in the past. I can send that out.
Okay, yeah, we maybe add that to your content calendar. The same with the post about the hierarchy.
Yeah, yeah, I will do that. But you really, you have to go into that. You have to go into those demos like you are evaluating a new mate. Really, I mean, like this is an expensive. These contracts are expensive. They're usually like a 3-year contract, so they're not easy to get out of. So you need to go into that with that perspective, and you need to ask hard questions. So some advice I've been given is to ask about metrics. So there's customer service scores that they keep in the industry. There's retention metrics. So ask them about those things. And if they can't provide them for you, that's a big red flag. But focus on those things that are your must-haves, and make them show you those things in the demo. Like walk me through it. If they can use your data or your processes, like even better. But you need to really do a lot of due diligence, because they will show you the things that they want to show you. And a lot of, unfortunately, I've seen it too many times where people get enamored with, oh, look at this user interface, or look at this dashboard that it does, but then they forget about, well, it doesn't do all these other things that we need it to do. And they end up, in a long-term contract that's not really meeting their needs. So I guess answering your question, I do think that there are vendors that are better than others, but it's really hard to say like this is the best one. I think you just really have to do a lot of research. If it's a really big investment, there's lots of organizations that offer like consulting around shopping for systems. I would look into something like that, because those people are experts in shopping, and they know those things that you may not be thinking to ask. So
it's worth connecting with like an HR tech advisory or an HR tech consultancy to help.
Yeah, definitely. Depending on the size of the organization, the amount you're going to spend, the complexity of the system, I definitely would recommend that.
So I don't know what this means, but maybe you can fill me in on yours and Adam's secret here. Tim's top 10 tech teammates. What's that?
I don't know. Adam, you're going to have to clarify. Like, was this like my list of my top vendor list? Maybe?
I don't know. I'm asking you. Adam, what is this? What are you referring to? Because Tim does. What? While we wait for Adam's answer, wanted to quickly. He says, "I was just being."
Yes. I appreciate alliteration. I said that earlier.
Yeah. Okay. When you're talking about top vendors, okay.
Yes. Yeah, maybe someday I'll be in a place where I could do a list, but not right now.
If anybody who is watching who has like a top 10 list, we'd love to have that. If you wanted to have a post that you've got out there that you wanted to add the link to the comments here, or if you know of like a top 10 list, something that's not on like TechCrunch or what's Crunchbase, something that you yourself, feel quite adamant about. What's your top 10 list? Or in fact, anybody who's on this live, if you have a top 10 list, let us know. All right, so I'm going to go back before we had the question about the top 10 teammates. And Ryan mentioned research. Okay, this is part of one of the suggestions for when you're looking for a vendor. Research the RFP request for proposal of other companies on the type of tech solution you're seeking. Great place to learn what the nice to haves and must haves are. Oh, that is a great suggestion.
Yeah, and I say, definitely don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think it's why there's a lot of value in having a good HRIS or HR network of people you can reach out to that, like, hey, have you had experience with X vendor, or we're looking for a new ATS, what do you have done? There's lots of great resources out there. And and I do look at those sites like Trust Radius, and I think Capterra is another one that do a lot of those vendor. And it's it's not perfect, but you kind of can see some of the things that people have complained about for specific vendors or things that they've been looking for.
Isn't Capterra kind of like just like a Glassdoor in a way for HR tech. Like, sometimes you can go by it and sometimes you can't. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you an idea.
You have to take everything with a grain of salt. I usually look, not necessarily looking at specific comments, but you kind of start to see patterns of things, and everybody's going to complain about customer service and things like that. But I think that paired with the other research that you've done, if you're looking at a specific company like, UKG or Workday or Cornerstone or whoever, like, you can find on LinkedIn, you can find easily find other people that have used that system, and people love to share their insight and their advice. I've done that. If somebody wanted to reach out to me about systems that I've used, I would gladly give them my feedback and a lot of those questions that you should be asking.
So quickly, oh wow. If we put this comment on the screen, it might cover our faces. So just everybody be aware. But I appreciate it, Adam. So it's definitely hard to rank top 10 HR technologies. It really comes down to the context, like Tim mentioned. Are you a startup or an SMB? Are you in the healthcare or tech, etc.? Every technology has trade-offs. Oracle and SAP are great for holistic reporting and support giant organizations. And Adam, I've also heard that ADP is great if you're interested in like payroll data. They like to have the largest payroll data repository of all of the systems. Going back to Adam's comment, but they're harder to configure and you can't just move agilely with them. So more mid-sized businesses probably want more flexible solutions. I think we'll probably see more HCM solutions for SMBs in 2024. Thank you, Adam, for that comment. Appreciate it. So I'm going to go quick again, switch or pivot back to the questions that we had prepared, Tim. And one of the questions was about the importance of HR working with IT. And I know that I have why I think HR and IT working together is important. I always, when I was working with organizations, I always made friends. First friends I made was in IT, because you never know when you're going to send an email that you need somebody to retract quickly. And that's why you make friends with IT. Or if something goes wrong with your computer, if you're friends with them, they jump you to the front of the line.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my reasoning for why HR and IT need to be friends, but you have different reasoning. So what's the importance of HR working with IT and subject matter experts when implementing new technologies in the organization?
Yeah, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but again, you're going to hear, plug and play, or stand up in a few weeks, but rarely are these systems as simple as the vendor may sell it. So especially if you're in a large organization, you're going to need some sort of support. I mean, the big thing that I've had is single sign-on. Like, you don't want people having to log into this system over here and have a different login for this system over here, and when they get checking their email, a different login. So having single sign-on is such a huge benefit and really helps that user experience. But many times that requires IT setting that up for you. So I think that getting them involved, even if it's just like, hey, will you come to our requirements, our demo, and just so we can talk about like if this is something that you all are going to need to be involved in. At the very least, it makes them feel included. What you don't want, and we've all been there, is somebody calling you and saying, you having to call IT and be like, oh, we're like 6 months into this project and we realize that we need IT help. They're not going to be very happy if you're asking them to drop other things and help them on this project. So being there early. I mean, one of the best strategies I've seen for building that relationship, and I've had that at my last two companies, is having like a peer group where you meet like monthly or biweekly with the members of IT that support your team, and just talking about projects, working on like a priority list, like these are our top projects. But you're right, like having those people that you can reach out to, like for a quick question. I mean, you don't want to end up in the service desk queue or whatever waiting when you can call Jane or Bob or whatever in IT, and they can answer it for you quickly. So it's just so important. I think I would say if you had to ask me like my key to success, not that I'm like this amazing like HR person, but what I would say, what I feel has made me successful in HR is building relationships. It's not being like a tech wizard or whatever. It's having those relationships, and that's with people in IT. It's with payroll. It's with finance. Just things just move so much smoother, and people are happier. They're happier to work together. They're happier to support you when you have those relationships. So.
And your November 2023 newsletter talks all about the relationships you should have.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think in two, and I talk to that, and I actually have one coming up pretty soon, but talking about the relationship between HR, tech, and HR. Because a lot of times HRIS people, you can get separated or isolated from the regular HR people because you have different focuses, different ways of thinking about things. But just having that relationship, with your HR business partners, your benefits people, your recruiters, like that relationship is huge in making systems work.
In some companies, the HR person is also the HR tech person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's also balancing that as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that can be really difficult. That can be really difficult for a lot of people. And I think there comes a point, and it's different for every company, where you need to say, we need to have a dedicated HRIS person. And I see a lot more companies posting those jobs that didn't have them before. So I think companies are starting to realize that you can't just take a recruiter and say, okay, you need to manage the ATS now. Like it's such a time commitment. And they're saying, okay, we really need a HRIS person that can support that system, so the recruiter can focus on recruiting.
I'm really surprised that, I don't know if you saw the list of LinkedIn jobs on the rise for 2024. Mm-hmm. I'm really surprised that some of those jobs, you would think that there would have been more AI jobs, mm-hmm. like supply chain and AI and HR right. and AI and, recruiting and AI, like some kind of combo of the functional expertise of the functional department mm-hmm. and AI or Gen AI. And so I was really surprised there was nothing there with HR and AI.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, HR tends to lag in any technology. They tend to lag behind their peers in finance or marketing or whatever. And it's not always a bad thing. Like, as we all would probably agree, like there's a lot of hype around AI right now. There's a lot of mm-hmm. promises that I think are not really tenable or are achievable. So, it's probably going to be a certain size of company that could have a person dedicated in HR specifically to AI. But I think, there's kind of a broader conversation around like automation and efficiency. And actually, I saw 2 job postings for a company yesterday where they were hiring a HR like automation expert. And so I do wonder if we'll start seeing, especially from bigger companies, starting to see things like that, because, as we all know, like our HR processes are so cumbersome. And so many HR people spend so much time administering that they are not spending their time, doing whatever it is, whether it's recruiting or supporting benefits or, employee relations or things like that. And I think that's where I see the promise of things like AI and automation is taking away some of that administrative burden so they can focus on those tasks that really drive value for the HR organization.
So I'm going to throw up Ryan's last comment here, and then we're going to get into my favorite questions of the whole live. So Ryan said, from the opposite end, their involvement should be welcomed. The earlier, the better. From a sales angle, it would only make the ability to close the deal more certain, eliminate that possibility of an IT impediment at the end of an already hard sales cycle. So that in audience, that's in regards to when Tim and I were talking about HR, the partnership between HR and IT. Yeah.
I think that the vendor, and a lot of vendors have done this. I've seen they will recommend like, hey, you should have an AI or an IT person when we do this demo or we do this evaluation, because there's so many things that non-IT people may not be thinking about. So
we're kind of running up on time. So I'm going to take the two questions that we have, our last two questions, and actually mesh them together for you. The first question, again, these are my favorite questions to ask everybody, is what HR tech platforms are you analyzing right now and why? And then mesh with the second question, what are some of your new favorite HR tech platforms right now and why?
Yeah. So I think the thing that what I'm looking at specifically, and it's kind of boring when I tell people this, they kind of like have this crestfallen look, like I just like bummed them out. But knowledge management is a huge. They're expecting like something really cool and fun, but I think don't go too far on a tangent, but a lot of things I've read, the real benefits of AI is going to be on the boring tasks, the things that we don't like to do. But I think knowledge management, I just see in HR and in HRIS specifically, like there's so many like weird things that you have to deal with, like one-off situations that you're like, oh, we've never had to do that before. And there's got to be a way, and IT teams actually are really good at this. And this is where I've seen it before, is having like a knowledge management system that can be updated, that can be easily queried. And I think that's where AI could be a huge benefit, is, analyzing text across, let's say you have like an error that pops up in your ATS or something. Like when somebody solves that problem, they type in like, here's the error, here's how we fix it. And then next time the error pops up, another technician types that in, okay, here's how they fixed it last time. But you can easily end up with these duplicated entries or incorrect entries, or even like policies and procedures for an HR company. You end up with stuff all over the place. So I think, and I've seen some systems that could do this. I think there's some things that we could build ourselves about managing all that knowledge, making it easily accessible, making it easily stored, so that you're not spending time. We spend so much time trying to remember or dig up emails about a issue that we fixed, 6 months ago, when if you had that easily at your fingertips, it would cut out, potentially hours of unnecessary work. So I've actually been looking at, this isn't really an HR tech platform, but I've been looking at, what can we do in SharePoint? Like Microsoft, as anybody who knows has been following AI, they're doing a ton with Copilot and with Power Automate. So I've been playing around to see what can we do in SharePoint, which is a tool we already have, to make that knowledge more organized and searchable. But talking about specifically HR tech platforms, I said before, I'm hesitant to talk about specific vendors just because of my role, but there's a lot of companies that have been doing AI even before AI was cool. And I think those are the ones that I've been interested in, especially those that are doing some of that knowledge management. I've seen some systems where, what I saw this yesterday actually, where a company built like a customer service chatbot, and it was totally generative AI, but people figured out how to hack it and get it to talk bad about the company and tell them crazy stuff. I don't think AI is ready for that, but I think like managing all that data on the back end that goes into feeding those answers, so that you may still have like structured things that you're feeding in a chatbot, so it doesn't go off the rails, but on the back end, like managing all that, and like as new questions come in, like feeding that into the data you're gathering. Like I think there's a lot of potential for AI to help with some of those things. So that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah. So we use Progressive HR. We use SharePoint with all of our clients. Mm-hmm. So it's been very interesting to kind of watch the evolution of it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited.
All right. You're excited. If you're excited, I'm excited. So I feel like we chose the right knowledge management tool.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah.
All right, everybody, we're going to wrap up here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next, our February guest is going to be Alex Kuchev. We're going to talk about, of course, generative AI. And we haven't exactly had a date set for that yet, but you can think about probably the second or third week in February on Tuesday, midday. I want to thank you, audience, for all your great comments and all your great questions. Ryan, Teresa, Adam, Mindy, sorry, Mindy wasn't on today, Marnie, and Laura, so many other people. Thank you so much for joining us and contributing to this conversation. If you want to connect with Tim Whitley, go ahead. You can connect with Tim on LinkedIn, but you can also subscribe to the HR. I forgot tech there, so the HR Tech Wizard here. I am going to fix that because I want to make sure that we have this in there. There we go. All fixed. Okay, so connect with Tim Whitley on LinkedIn, and you can also subscribe to the HR Tech Wizard newsletter on Substack. Thank you, Resourceful Humans. I really appreciate your time today. Tim, thank you for joining me. Appreciate all the knowledge you were dropping on us. It kind of blew my mind. And, I think what you're helping people realize is that there's more to HRIS than just what meets the eye or what we think it is. So very much there's this kind of surface what HRIS is, but like you're the iceberg, the bottom of the iceberg. We're only seeing the tip, but you see the bottom. And thank you for educating us on that.
Yeah. Appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for describing it that way. I haven't thought about that before, so I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And audience, be on the lookout for the links that we're going to drop in to the comments after the live goes on replay, as well as those great posts that we've asked Tim to do in the future. And so everybody have a fantastic Tuesday and have a wonderful January week. And we will see you in February. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.